Hello and welcome to Unspooled. Today we are doing our best movies of the year bar list. We're going by U.S. theatrical release dates, if they had one, or U.S. straight to DVD release date, if those are on the list. Then whenever the release date was, as long as it was 2018 for a U.S. theatrical release. Then it is potentially on this list. I managed to top my goal by a lot. I was hoping to get 50 done for the first half of the year. I got 65, 67 because I have a couple documentaries that I don't actually put in my movie rankings that I'll talk about here first. So I got 65. How many did you get in?
25, it looks like.
25. All right. So
if my count is correct.
All right. So my first two the documentaries I'll start with. I've only seen two here. The first being Take Your Pills, directed by Allison Clayman. This is a very fascinating and interesting look at the current epidemic of Adderall usage. And I found it to be interesting. Now, my lone issue with this documentary is that isn't really a problem. It's just a weird thing I noticed, because most documentaries are trying to push you one way or the other on whatever its topic is, usually. This one doesn't do that. It's just kind of going straight down the middle of here's all these people singing the praises of Adderall usage for non-prescription reasons. And here are some of the dangers of it. It's up to you to decide how you feel about this. And I liked that. Some people might not like the non-committal nature of the documentary, but I enjoyed that, and I found it to be an interesting one. It is a Netflix production, so you can go check that out whenever you want. My other documentary, I was wavering back and forth on whether or not to even put this on the list, because it's a trilogy of YouTube videos. But I decided, well, it's a 90-minute runtime, so I'm going to count it, even if most people might not. And that is Lindsay Ellis's series on the Hobbit films, a 3-part documentary detailing the flaws of the Hobbit trilogy. The first video is the actual story and plot issues in the movies. Then part 2 is about the behind-the-scenes production issues that plagued the production of The Hobbit. And then part 3 focuses on the legal battles that led to the creation of the Hobbit Law in New Zealand. And this is a very insightful critique of both the Hobbit trilogy, as well as the way media is produced, as well as typically Americans' standard mode of operation in ignoring things wrong with adored media and whatnot like that, and how things can age poorly or well. And this tackles that to an extent as well. I quite enjoyed it. I went back and forth on whether or not to actually count that on this or not, but I did. So those are the two documentaries I have for you.
Okay.
So then, of course, that does mean my actual movie list is all, non-documentary stuff.
Okay.
And actually this year, I think it's all feature length. No shorts yet. I haven't really looked into shorts from this year yet. So no short films on here, all feature film releases. So we'll start with our worst stuff. As always, I start at 10th worst and go to what I name the worst movie of the year.
Okay.
So 10th worst for me, Netflix made a lot of weird decisions. 10th worst, a Netflix production, The Cloverfield Paradox, from Julius Ona. This was just a mess of a film here. It brings so many questions to the extended Cloverfield universe, such as when do any of these take place in relation to each other, basically, is the question. And where exactly is this film set as far as at what stage of the Cloverfield, like the monster invasion? When is this set in relation to that? Because the ending, it's very obviously like supposed to be like the same creature from the first Cloverfield, I think, but it looks nothing like it. But I think that's what they were going for. If you haven't gathered yet, yeah, spoiler alert for every single movie I talk about, at least. I can't speak to that on some of the stuff you might talk about, but anything I talk about, spoiler for it. But it's also very unwilling and unable to answer these questions. It also borrows heavily from other and much better sci-fi films, mostly Alien and Gravity. It borrows very heavily from, you know, the evil creature loose on the space station thing of Alien. Then the this person's alone, or these two people are alone and have to figure out how to get out of space with very little to no communication with Earth stuff from Gravity. And admittedly, the lead actor here, Gugu Mbatha Raw, I probably mispronounced that, but as well as there's one plot point in this film, one plot point conflict, the driving plot point, other than what happened, because we get into like time travel in this movie, and alternate dimensions and alternate realities and stuff, is Hamilton, the main lead woman. Now, in her normal world, her family died in a house fire. Her children did. So it's just her and her husband by themselves now, and her children all died. But in this alternate reality, she's thrust into by science because the alternate dimension is set like years before the other one, so that fire hasn't occurred yet. So she has to decide, do I want to try and stay in this reality to be with my family again or not, type of thing. And that is way too good to be in this movie. Like, that is way too interesting of a plot point to be in this awful movie. But that's why it's only 10th worst, because it's at least minorly interesting on that front. But other than that, it's not particularly interesting.
Okay. Well, I'm sure I will mention spoilers. I don't know about everyone, but every movie, but you know, there's going to be spoilers in a show like this. So, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, my 10th worst, A Quiet Place. Now, just because it's on, like I said, I've only watched 25 movies this year from this year.
So this is what, like 15th overall, basically?
So, I mean, don't have it sound like it's terrible because it's on my 10th worst, because obviously these aren't going to be all terrible. And A Quiet Place is one that is not terrible.
Say, is that like 15th overall for you?
This would be 16th overall.
Okay, I mean, that's about the same range I have it for me.
So 16th to 25th are my 10 worst.
Right. I mean, that's about the range I have it overall, but yeah.
So don't, jump up and go, God, 10th worst. Oh, no. No, it's not a bad movie. It's not perfect. And I won't go into quite as much detail as you did probably on my movies. This one, it's a drama. It's a horror movie, a post-apocalyptic world. They're supposedly a family. They're forced to live in silence because the monsters have ultra-sensitive hearing and will attack at the slightest sound. And yet, near the end of the movie, we have a baby born to this family. That's one of my points. I think, like,
one of the shortest and quietest births in history. Yeah.
It's a little out there, but that's the part, the rest of the movie is really good. Emily Blunt, oh boy, some other guys. I don't know these actors in this movie too well, But I know
John Krasinski from The Office.
John Krasinski, Millicent Simons,
Noah Jupes, the little boy.
You know, but Emily Blunt to me was pretty decent. It's a good movie. It's scary. It'll keep you on the edge of your seat for the hour and a half it lasts, or ever how long it is. Just there's some things about the no noise thing that just got to me though.
Yeah, see, that's the weird dichotomy here. Like your bottom 10, by and large, at least the first half of it's like good stuff that just kind of gets the short end of your thing. Whereas mine's like my bottom 10 is like there's nothing redeeming about any of these movies.
Right.
In my bottom 10, or if there is, it's like one little thing that's maybe okay. Speaking of no redeeming qualities and horrible Netflix movies, at number 57 overall, 9th worst, The Polka King.
Okay.
From Maya Forbes and Wallace Wlodarski, with Jack Black continuing to make baffling acting choices. I thought Jumanji was annoying, but I was wrong. I didn't think he could be more annoying than his Jumanji performance. I was wrong. This is a very thoroughly boring crime drama, retrofitted as a dark comedy that is not remotely funny and not remotely intriguing on a crime drama level either. And the drama, sure, this is based on a true story, but it's so bizarre for this to be your subject matter. Like, you're making The Godfather about a polka musician?
Yes.
What is the thought process here behind, let's get Jack Black to sing polka?
Well, it's based on a true story.
Sure.
So they didn't make this one up. It's based on a true story.
Yeah, why did you choose to adapt this story is my biggest question. And then Jack Black is just awful. He's horribly miscast. He's this Polish polka musician. And it's not remotely feasible, nor is his Polish accent remotely good. I mean, don't bother with this. It's a piece of garbage film that I know you'll talk more about in a bit.
Yes, I will.
When we get to the best end, I know that. But
yes.
Oh my.
Yes. My number 9 worst, or second worst, 9th worst.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For me, if at the start of the year you had told me that this would be in my 10 worst, I would have said, you are so funny. There's no way. But Solo, a Star Wars movie, a Star Wars story.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Directed by Ron Howard. This one just did not meet my expectations. It's not a disaster, but there's not that much redeeming that I could find about this movie. It's not one I'll have to watch over and over like other Star Wars ones. I'm sorry, it got an audience score of 65% on Rotten Tomatoes, so other people aren't in love with this either. It is supposedly a fun and fast-paced space adventure. I did not find it to be fun or fast-paced, either one. So I'm not sure what people, maybe they're watching a different movie than I saw. Maybe we got the Midwest version of the movie. But
I do know a lot of the people on the internet that I read what they're talking about is that they like this more than they did Last Jedi because this is Star Wars. Last Jedi is trying to be like philosophically engaging or something, and a lot of people apparently didn't like that. And they like this because this is okay. Yeah, he's going around with his blaster and like we know all this stuff, but I don't know. I know a lot of Star Wars fans like this movie.
Well, okay.
But
I did.
I don't know. I'll get to it later.
I
Don't
did
worry.
not like it that great, so it's my 9th worst.
Yeah. 8th worst for me. 58th movie overall. Talk about a downfall. 50 Shades Freed. Yeah. I will admit, the first 50 Shades Grey movie, not great, but it's at least competent. This, oh my. This is just insanely boring, very, very stupid. And ultimately, for a movie that, in theory, right, is supposed to be like this super sexy, erotic thriller, right, with all this kinky sex going on, that's kind of the premise of the books, at least. None of the sex scenes in here are anything you haven't seen before in a movie of this vein. Except maybe for the one time they use ice cream as like lube, which was really weird, and I don't really think would be a very practical application. I don't know for certain, nor do I care to find out, but I don't know. The plot's very basic. Most of the scenes don't really have anything to do with one another for the most part. And while I was watching this, I got so bored with the movie. I started taking notes on just the segments in the movie I found really weird and had nothing to do with anything else that ever happened. So, for example, at the start of the movie, roughly, we spend about 2 to 3 minutes on Anastasia, the main woman here. We spend 2 to 3 minutes on her work email address. Because at work, her email is still Anastasia Steele, I think, at employer website or whatever. And she just recently got married and is now Anastasia Gray. And her husband comes in and is angry that she hasn't changed her work email in the last like day or something. We spend like 2 to 3 minutes on that.
Okay.
Yeah. We spend 2 to 3 minutes on architecture plans for this new house that they never go to or mention again or bring up ever, or I don't even know if they actually bought the house or not. I don't know. We have 2 to 3 minutes on Christian getting a haircut. Yeah. We spend 4 minutes with Anastasia going to a bar with her friend, and the entire scene is her telling this friend, I can't be here, I need to go home, for 4 minutes. That's the whole scene. Now, we spend a minute of having Christian butcher Maybe I'm Amazed on the piano. And then some just weird decisions I didn't fully understand. Maybe this would actually happen. I don't know. After they are in a high-speed car chase where they're being chased by a stalker, they pull into a parking garage and have sex in the car immediately afterwards. After engaging in sexual intercourse, they have a discussion, and they can't figure out why somebody would be stalking them. You know, this billionaire man and his semi-attractive wife. They can't figure out why anyone would be stalking them. Christian is deeply upset with his wife because she has gotten pregnant from him. And she becomes extremely upset over her husband seeking emotional support and advice on their relationship from another woman that he's friends with. So I was so bored, I had to just start taking notes on the insanity of this movie. I don't recommend it, but I think this maybe could be one of those movies that could work if like you do like home Mystery Science Theater 3000 stuff. Like if you want to sit and riff on the movie with people for the whole time, it could maybe work for that. But for other than that, this is not remotely worth sitting through.
Sounds exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. My 8th worst for the year is a Netflix exclusive, I believe, is When We First Met, starring Adam Devine. It's not a terrible movie, but to me it has a couple plot things that I don't like or I don't understand too well. But this one is like Groundhog Day meets 40 First Dates. It's an interesting concept, but ultimately it falls flat, I think. The problem I have with this movie, and I'll try and explain it. This may get me in trouble, but I'll try and explain. Because it's a Groundhog Day. So he goes to a party. And after this party, then 3 years elapse, and he's lived these 3 years. And okay, those 3 years didn't go as he planned or as he wanted.
Okay.
So somehow at the end of this 3 years, he time travels back to that first party.
Okay.
Okay, now I understand that part. That's pretty simple. Okay, of course, he remembers it. No one else remembers anything, but he does.
Mm-hmm.
Then he goes to the party, the second time and wakes up 3 years later he doesn't remember the 3 years in between now. And everyone else does. So, well, I didn't like that. So after those 3 years, he goes back to the party, goes to sleep, and 3 years has elapsed, and he wakes up here, and he doesn't remember what happened in between 3 years, but everyone else does. And I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure how that works. But in the end, it turned, this is your great spoiler here, but is in the end, it turns out that the way it happened the first time, is the way it ends up being, because that's the way he likes it then at the end, of course. So we went back in time and did all this stuff 3 or 4 different times.
So nothing happened.
To basically end up the way it ended at the start, yeah.
So what was the point?
So I think the plot or the point is just, hey, don't worry or don't try and live your life a different way, because maybe your life is good the way it is or something. I'm not really sure, but that's the way I take it.
Well, if that's what you're going to do, I don't think you need to shoehorn in time loops.
But you got these.
But okay.
Go to the party, I fall asleep. Boy, 3 years is gone, and I don't remember anything in those 3 years, but everyone else does.
Mm-hmm.
It's really weird, and like I say, it's my 8th worst.
7th worst, Ready Player One. This is just a mess. Now, I will admit, I think I said this before, I liked the movie more than I liked the book. I did actually read the book before I saw the movie. So I was told the book was really good and I'd really like the book. I did not. I like the movie more than I do the book. But as you can tell, this is awful. It's so stupid, so tedious, way, way too long, so pointless. Half of the logic doesn't even with it is the first challenge or whatever that all these people have been stuck on for 5 years or something, right? Is a race. And the solution to the race is driving backwards from the starting line. No one has tried this in 5 years. Really, one of the first things people do when they get a new racing game is see if they can finish the race going backwards around the whole track. And no one's thought of this in 5 years. So that either everyone's completely stupid, which I think is possible with how this film goes, or the writers don't know how video games work, which is the more likely thing with it being Spielberg and the dude who wrote the book. That's the more likely thing. I do like they changed this movie isn't as nearly as creepy as the book is, because there's not like the main dude stalking the girl to make her fall in love with him thing. And the whole thing doesn't feel like a 300-page self-masturbatory exercise in the creator's own nerdiness, like the book comes off as. It doesn't have that feel to it, at least. It doesn't feel as disgusting as the book feels to read. Unfortunately, there is the possibility for a very interesting film and a very interesting story in this movie. The problem is Spielberg doesn't know how to make that movie. Because that story would be about how technology and video games are this ultimate escape from this horrible reality and how people escape into these items. But no, the film actively ignores going into that direction. It doesn't even want to talk about that, or it doesn't want to talk about how the reality is actually terrible or anything like that. It doesn't address any of this at all because it doesn't want to. It settles on basically that we need to turn off our machines, our devices, or whatever, to experience our own reality, no matter how awful that reality might be, more often. That if we just spent more time in our reality, even if it's a blasted hellscape with demons running wild trying to murder us all, we need to spend more time in it. Okay. And then the main character and his crew don't use their newfound wealth, because of course they win this challenge, of course they do, to better the world's reality in any way, only their own reality. They buy themselves a big apartment and whatever cool junk they want, and that's really it. Ultimately, nothing about this movie is particularly interesting, except for the Shining sequence. I did like that. Which is the only part of this movie that felt remotely fun, the way the whole movie's in theory supposed to be, and also the part that felt the least Spielbergery. So take that as you will, because it felt like I was in a Kubrick movie. So like, oh yeah, I'm down, people. But the one conceit I must have is this movie, as constructed, could work if we're supposed to interpret either our protagonist or the old dude that died and created this whole thing as evil. Then this could work, because then it's about this dude who single-handedly disrupts the culture of the world and resets it 60 years to make everyone obsessed with 60 years ago and not care about modern life or modern reality in any way. It could work if we're supposed to take it as either our protagonist or the old dude that made this thing are evil. This could work if those guys are supposed to be villains. This movie does work then, but I can tell that's not the intent. But if that was the case, this movie would actually be legitimately interesting and legitimately good. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We're supposed to take it, oh yeah, the 80s were awesome, yeah. Forget everything post-1989. The 80s were great. That's really the tone they go for. It's like, really? That's your tone? Okay, great. I don't really think Spielberg wants to live in that world, but I don't know.
Spielberg might want to, yes. My next one, I believe this is another Netflix exclusive, Battle Drone. Directed by Mitch Gould, whoever he is. Stars some people I never heard of, etc. This one, some people say it's the Expendables meets the A-Team. Now, in this full throttle action film.
I'm sorry. There's a difference between the Expendables and the A-Team?
Yes.
What's the difference? The Expendables are all old guys?
Expendables are old guys.
Isn't that basically the only difference?
That apparently they're expendable, but
it's just overblown, insane, silly action movies, right?
Right. Meets the A-Team, yes.
Okay.
This is where a group of skilled mercenaries find themselves betrayed by the U.S. government and are forced to fight their way out of an ambush by a new and lethal team of human droids. Well, see, that sounds good and that sounds cool, but that's not what it turns out to be. I'm sorry, this lethal team of human droids. The problem with them is, I mean, it's great that the U.S. government's trying to make up these let's say, soldiers that can go into battle and you don't actually die. People don't die. It's these droids would die. But when they say they're a lethal team, one shot to the head killed them.
So it's the I forget what they're called, but like the droid troops from Star Wars, or like the clone troopers. This is kind of the same idea, basically.
Kind of, except these you have to have a human person way away actually controlling them. Well, that's great, except these humans that are controlling them are not like super karate people. They're normal human Joes like you and me. So when you go out there and fight a expendable or an A-team expert or an atomic blonde type person, I don't care what kind of armor, you're not going to beat them because you're regular Joe.
This is the premise of Fear. The video game Fear, this is the premise. Except in there, they're psychically controlled with their mind to control these troops.
It was funny because
it's the same premise without the horror bits.
These are supposed to be super, and one dude shoots him right in the head, and the droid is dead. And it's like, well, that was awfully easy. The droids, because you as a human, you're 80 miles away controlling them. But you have no peripheral vision. You can't tell what's happening to your side. I mean, they're not super duper. And that was my big problem with the movie.
That's an interesting concept, though. That could work.
It could, but in this movie, they were not super droids at all. So, my fourth worst movie of the year.
My sixth worst film now. I think you're counting backwards. I'm on sixth worst, so I think that was your seventh worst.
Oh, okay.
Sixth worst, A Wrinkle in Time.
Oh, yeah, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry.
Yeah, A Wrinkle in Time. I'll admit this. Ava DuVernay did a great job. The film looks beautiful and is well executed on a directorial front. Problem is the script is atrocious. This is a very silly adventure flick that thinks it's some grandiose exploration of humanity and morality and what does it truly mean to be a family and all this stuff. That's what it thinks it is. Unfortunately, it's a very silly adventure flick. And there are only two people that get that this is a super silly film. Mindy Kaling shows up for like 10 minutes and is super great. But she knows she's in a silly adventure flick because she is hamming it up. And it is a lot of fun. And then I don't know the actor, but whoever the main girl, her younger brother, who's like 10, he knows he's in a silly, stupid adventure flick, so he is hamming it up big time. It's hilarious. I want to see the movie he is in, not the movie everyone else is in. The last 30 or 40 minute turns into a completely overblown CGI fest that is admittedly very visually engaging and visually impressive, but lacks any kind of interesting story elements. So I don't know if that's just a problem with the source that you're adapting here, or if it's just this particular adaptation didn't work. I can't speak to that. All I can say is this film did not work story-wise. If you just want to watch it for some cool visuals, it works well for that. The visuals are great here. CGI is done very well. Unfortunately, there's not much else to this movie that I found particularly entertaining other than the young boy's acting performance is legitimately hilarious because he thinks he's like Nick Cage Jr., I think, and it's hilarious. But the rest of the movie, I don't watch it for an interesting story. Visuals, sure, buy the 4K, blast it out on your giant screen television, and it'll work for a nice visual test.
All righty. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My
Sixth worst.
Sixth worst. Hereditary. Directed by Ari Aster.
You don't go too deep. I'll talk about this much later.
Yes, I know you will discuss this, as it's probably in your top 10 or close, but
oh, it is. Don't worry.
For me, it's too long. It's not. There's just too many holes in this movie for me. It wasn't all that scary. And I know in a movie you have to, you can't show every second of every day and everything, but things were, some spoilers again, but when you're driving and you kind of chop the head off your sister and and the police don't get involved or anything, I just, it's kind of.
That was a bad moment?
Well,
that was one of the things that I love about this was that particular moment I found to be so incredible.
No.
I found that to be absolutely incredible, that bit.
Well, it may be incredible, but it ain't very true to life where, you don't have to go through the police or anything. Nothing was ever said about what happened. I mean, those are some points in the movie just.
Okay.
They don't do me well. I see on Rotten Tomatoes the audience scores of 57%.
Well, with these kind of movies, those are awful.
So
always. You can't pay attention to that on this kind of a movie.
So you'll discuss it a lot more in detail.
Yeah.
For me, it was not my cup of tea.
Okay. At fifth worst, Peter Rabbit. This is, the same complaint I have with a lot of these awful movies. Stupid, boring, very pointless, that can generously be called a children's movie, but at least to me, seems to hold its audience in contempt, as I feel this is way too stupid for a child with even a slight modicum of intelligence would be bored absolutely silly by this travesty of a thing projected onto a screen. The characters have very little to no depth. None of the jokes are remotely funny. There is this recurring gag of a group of pigeons that sing the songs from the soundtrack, and it gets really annoying, especially when we get to the pigeons rap number. I could have done without. I have no clue why Domhnall Gleeson is in this at all. Like, does the casting director have some dirt on Domhnall Gleeson, or did he just need a new wing added onto his house, or something? Or I don't know why he's in this. But he's trying. He's Domhnall Gleeson. He's gonna be good. Whatever garbage he's in, he's gonna be good. But I don't get the appeal of this kind of garbage. I really don't.
Okay.
Even if you're going to say, well, it's a kid's movie, so that means it should still be good. Like, really? Like, that's going to be your defense. This is a kid's movie. So is something we'll talk about later two things I loved a whole lot later that we'll talk about and why they are so great. This, no. Do not bother.
All right, my fifth worst, Early Man.
Oh.
It's a well done animated movie. It's got Eddie Redmayne and Tom Hiddleston in it. This just was, the plot's thin. It's probably really good for kids, but the plot's just too thin and not much there for adults, I don't think. So I'm not going to say much about it. Early Man, my fifth worst.
Fourth worst, the 1517 to Paris. This is a deeply uninteresting film. that continues to prove my Clint Eastwood is an awful director take. The selling point of this movie, at least in theory, is that people stopped this terrorist attack on some train, right? That's the main selling point of this movie. That's like the last 5 minutes of the movie, maybe 10 if you're being generous. That's like the very, very last 5 to 10 minutes. Before that, we attempt to add some sort of context and characterization to these people that really doesn't work. Now, there is, at least I think, there is an attempt to explore the kind of semi-brainwashed nature of many mid-2000s youth when it comes to the military and the glorified nature of war and military service, thanks in large part to the film industry in the 80s and 90s. But Clint Eastwood is way too blindly devoted to portraying any and everything to do with America and the American military in a positive light that he can't come up with any remotely interesting criticism in this regard. And nothing remotely interesting comes in that first 30-minute section. This is basically 3 30-minute sections. That's the first 30 minutes. The middle 30 minutes is the good 30 minutes when it just turns into a tourist home video of Europe. And we just wander around Paris for 10 minutes with the characters barely talking, except they're going ooh, there's the Eiffel Tower. Ooh, look, the Louvre. That's the part I liked, when the characters shut up. I liked that. And that's when it's actively avoiding the story or progressing the plot in any way. Now, the decision, no matter how pure the intent was here, to cast the people who partook in this event in real life, no matter how pure of heart that decision was, it's an awful one, as they cannot act to save their lives. Additionally, Eastwood brought in a bunch of good to great comedic actors, like Tony Hale is in this, Jenna Fisher is in this, Judy Greer is in this, Jaleel White is in this. But they were all cast for purely dramatic roles and are on screen for maybe a combined 6 minutes, maybe. And that really doesn't work at all. Don't bother. I don't get what the appeal of this one is, outside of the military dude bros who are oh yeah, man, America, whoo. I don't get why you would watch this movie unless you're one of those people.
Well, I can say it on Rotten Tomatoes, the tomato meter gives it 24%. So not too many critics liked it. Audience score of 40%. So it's not a well-liked movie. My fourth worst, Tremors, A Cold Day in Hell. I think it's the 6th in this series. Honestly, it's the same old stuff. You're just in the cold this time. If you need to go into more detail, if you like the first 5 Tremors, you'll like this one probably, or maybe not, because it's the same old stuff. Except, at least in this one, they're trying to capture a live one. But nothing interesting, nothing that great about this movie. So, my fourth worst.
Third worst, The Vanishing of Sydney Hall. Logan Lerman is another guy who I don't get his acting choices. Why did he agree to this movie? I don't know.
Why for a paycheck?
I guess, because there were 3 things I thought immediately after I stopped watching the movie. I think there's 20 minutes left. I just let it play and didn't pay attention. But there were 3 things I thought. First, that was insanely tedious. 2, what happened? 3, why in the world does Logan Lerman insist on doing these movies? he delivers incredible performances in awful movies. Like, he has like one good movie that he's in, and that's Perks of Being a Wallflower, which is good. Not great, but it's good. And the plot of this movie is just unnecessarily complicated because it's trying to tell three stories at the same time from three different parts in this dude's life. So it's like trying to tell like this high school story of him as a high schooler, then him as like a 25-ish year old best-selling author, and then him in his like 30s or something. So it's trying to tell these three different stories. And the story isn't actually all that complex, but the way that it's told makes it very hard for the audience to follow unless you're paying painstakingly close attention, which this film would have a hard time making you do. There is something good in here. There is a seed in here, but the plot thread is thrown away about 5 minutes after it's introduced. That plot being kind of self-censorship by a creative type, which could be an interesting topic to explore. Unfortunately, it's in here like 5 minutes. The ending gets very dark out of almost nowhere in the last third of the movie, because all of a sudden it's pretty standard like teen sex comedy in a high school story, your Animal House, that kind of junk, your standard teen sex comedy junk. And then it's like your standard tortured artist plot in the middle one. And then your third one's kind of like a vagabond tale of this dude just going out around the country on his various journeys or whatever. And then the last third gets super dark unnecessarily, because you have in the high school story the sudden revelation, oh, my friend's father is a child molester and has been abusing me and my sister for a decade. You then get, oh, I accidentally kind of killed my wife and unborn child in an elevator in the middle story. Yeah, it gets just insanely dark for no real good reason, all of a sudden out of nowhere. And once certain items are introduced into the plot, you're like, I know where this is going. You're going to go here, right, with that? Yes, I am. Just wait 10 minutes and I'll get there. That happens a lot. I hated sitting through this movie, and I hope that none of you have to.
Okay, well, my third worst, Pacific Rim Uprising. Yes, this is a sequel to 2013's Pacific Rim.
Very good movie.
This one there's lots of action in this movie, a lot of robots fighting each other, but that's all that happens in this movie practically. It is only an hour and 51 minutes, but it sure felt like about 3 hours to me. If you like robots fighting, go for it here, because that's what you're going to get.
I haven't watched that one. I have it queued up for tonight, though, but so we'll see. Second worst, Death Wish. Now, I was excited for this. Like, oh, Eli Roth doing a revenge movie about this guy who goes and kills a bunch of folks. Okay, this should be at least super insanely gory fun. It's not. I don't even know if there's any blood in this movie. Like, there's barely any, which is really weird for a movie about a vigilante going around and killing a bunch of people. There's hardly any gore. Sure, he kills a lot of people, but there's not a lot of gore involved in it. He just shoots them in the head and it's done.
Okay.
Like, yeah, I expected more from Eli Roth. And yeah, there's none of the fun or over-the-top absurdity that's needed to make this kind of a movie work or be enjoyable. And it's extremely tame for an Eli Roth film, which is not to my taste, but maybe other people might like that. Most of the actors aren't even really trying. Like, Bruce Willis is kind of like sleepwalking through this most of the time. And the biggest flaw of the movie is that it does attempt to tell like a very Batman-esque story it tries to tell this very moralistic tale about vigilante justice and its potential pitfalls, but it fails at doing so for more than like 2 minutes. And it doesn't really connect to the rest of the story. It's kind of shoehorned in. But yeah, don't bother.
Okay, well, I'll say that's a remake of the 1974 classic. So maybe go watch the 1974 one. Instead, your tomato meter on this one's only 18%. So, woo-wee. My second worst movie of the year, I think this may be another Netflix exclusive. Game Over, man.
Oh, it is.
Adam Devine again. He's in 2 of my bottom 10.
I don't know why he's getting leading roles.
I'm not sure if that's a sign or not.
I don't know. Is Netflix trying to make him happen the way Hollywood's been trying to make Dane DeHaan as a leading man happen for the last 2 years?
Maybe he's cheap or something. But
I guess. I don't know.
This movie is vulgar and nonsense.
It might work better as a video game, yeah.
It is just vulgar and nonsense. Don't bother. Game Over, man.
My worst movie of the year so far, and honestly, even worse than anything I watched last year. You just talked about it. Game Over, man. This thing is unfunny, unnecessarily crude. Now, obviously, I'm not one who has an issue with crude humor or vulgar humor. It needs to be funny, though. It's not funny in here.
No.
And it's just abundances of that in this disaster of a film. Devine and the rest of the cast are just either simply annoying or just mind-numbingly stupid. The twist of the movie, which is that one of the 3 main dudes is gay, isn't in theory a bad twist. It's a fine twist. The execution of it's atrocious, though. Because he goes from being this very thoughtful, intelligent, and witty dude to all of a sudden being super flamboyant, basically a super flamboyant, cock-hungry stereotype in about 10 seconds, which, yeah, no. It's got to be one way or the other. If he's going to be the stereotype, he needs to be it the whole time, whether he's out or not. The jokes are just painfully awful. They range from being about used condoms in the opening to penises being cut off to there's a whole scene devoted to rim jobs that like not particularly awful joke topics, just the way they're executed is atrocious. Do not bother with this garbage film.
Okay, my worst movie of the year so far, and I'm going to say by far my worst movie. It will be the worst movie at the end of the year, probably, unless I watch some of your bad ones. Ocean's 8.
Oh, boy.
Now, I'm not going to go into detail on this movie. This movie is long. It's boring. It's just like a regular Ocean's movie that just doesn't do anything great. They, plan a heist, pull off the heist, and live happily ever after. I'm sorry. I didn't like it. I was ready to leave the movie. I was ready to walk out of the theater.
You would have left early if I asked you to?
More than likely. This was not anywhere near entertaining.
All right. So I'm going to run through up to number 20 for me. So 55 up to 20, and then 20 to 10 will be my honorable mentions. Number 55, 12 Strong. A very standard paint-by-number war drama fueled entirely by American patriotism and a love of big explosions. Number 54, Paradox, another Netflix film, basically a Neil Young concert film with weird time travel plot thrown in. The Neil Young singing bits are good. The rest, don't bother. 53, Red Sparrow. Barely makes any sense, and there's like 8 billion plot twists to the point where like I don't really know what actually happened. Like if you're into seeing Jennifer Lawrence's boobs, this might be a good movie for you, but for people who don't want just that, don't bother. Number 52 overall, Proud Mary. This is very similar to John Wick, but about 8,000 times worse, as it's just an insanely uninteresting plot built around one action scene. The thing in John Wick is that action scene's like an hour long. In this, it's like 5 minutes. So, no. The last 5 to 10 minutes of this movie is pretty good. The first, like, hour-ish, don't bother. Number 51, Rampage. A deeply stupid, pointless excuse for a movie that is nothing more than an excuse to get The Rock to fight a giant crocodile. Number 50, Tremors, Cold Day in Hell. Occasionally, there's some fun to be had with this on occasion. Unfortunately, it's way too far and way too infrequent. And the main protagonist, the old guy, is so unlikable. Number 49, Ocean's 8. Way too long, even though it's just barely over 100 minutes. Supremely boring and just not entertaining enough, the heist bit, to redeem sitting through this. Number 48, The Strangers, Pray at Night. A very good-looking movie. I'll give it that. It looks great. But it is an entirely unnecessary sequel to a great horror film. The Strangers is a great home invasion movie. If you're into that, great. Unfortunately, this adds nothing new or interesting to the series. Very generic slasher film that is highly predictable and way too long. It's only 85 minutes long, but it's way too long. Yeah.
Okay.
I know, that doesn't make a lot of sense. This would work a lot better if it was like an hour.
Oh, my.
But yeah, no. 47, another Netflix movie, The Titan. This is a very slow, contemplative look at forced human evolution set in a dystopian future where overpopulation and nuclear war have ravaged the earth and made somehow only Los Angeles inhabitable. Science, sort of but not really, looks to send humanity to Titan, a moon of Jupiter. Or Saturn, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. There's some interesting bits in terms of the science stuff, but it's way too boring. Number 46 overall, another Netflix movie, A Futile and Stupid Gesture. This is a biopic detailing the creation of the National Lampoon, the magazine. That later made, like the vacation movies and Animal House and stuff like that. This details the creation of the magazine. And my largest problem for a movie that's about that is that it's not overly funny. It does have funny moments, mainly when it's parodying itself. But the rest is a rather tedious character drama that's either not a very interesting story to begin with or a very poor version of that story. Number 45 overall, Hellraiser Judgment. A somewhat lackluster 10th entry into the Hellraiser franchise. The gore and shock factor here is very high, but it doesn't really have anything interesting because the plot devolves into a very standard serial killer movie. Number 44, Forever My Girl. This is a pretty standard romance. Nothing new or really remarkable here. It's about this supposed country music superstar who goes back to his hometown to reconnect with the girl he left at the altar or something. The issues I have beyond it being the same thing I've seen 8,000 times is like, for being a country music superstar, I don't know how that works. Because like the songs he sings in this movie, like I don't know how they would be popular, but that may just be, I don't understand the appeal of post like 1990 country's music, at least not the popular stuff, but that could be that. I will admit that I did enjoy the father-daughter relationship stuff between him and his daughter that he didn't know he had. And I found that stuff to be very, very adorable, very cute, but I can't recommend the movie for just that. Number 43, another Netflix movie, Happy Anniversary. A rom-com with a somewhat interesting premise that on their third anniversary as a couple, this couple decides whether or not they should end their relationship, which is a moderately interesting premise for a female lead, because basically she's doing very rational things, but the movie's yelling at her going, why are you being so unreasonable, lady? And it's like, wait, so her boyfriend is maybe cheating on her, so she leaves him to go back to her home, and we're supposed to not like her because of that? What? Okay. Huh. So yeah, I don't know. Number 42, Midnight Sun. This has Arnold Schwarzenegger's son, I think, in it, Patrick Schwarzenegger. Now, unfortunately, he has none of the charm of Arnold, because he speaks in a way you can actually understand what he's saying, so it doesn't sound like he has no clue what he's saying like Arnold. But this is your pretty conventional girl who has suffering from some sort of illness, falls in love with the super hot neighbor guy. The story's fine for what it is, but nothing particularly interesting to me. But it's fine for what it is. Number 41 overall, Gringo. This is a very conventional corrupt businessman screws over a kind, honest man story. The comedy lands on occasion, like Charlize Theron is in this, and her whole character is that she's simply here to insult the other characters and talk about sex for the whole movie. That's all she does. And it is truly wonderful. She is great in this role. There's nothing else to the character, but she works in that role. The thriller aspects work for moments, but overall, this is a rather unremarkable affair. Number 40 overall, Maze Runner, The Death Cure. This is a pretty standard medical drama with some fun action sequences. The one thing I will give credence to, that I will give props to, the Maze Runner trilogy, each movie is very different. Because the first one has this very weird, like, homoerotic feel to it. The middle one is very much like a zombie, like Mad Max type movie. Like Mad Max with zombies, basically. That's what the middle one is. And this one's kind of like very medical drama, very like Contagion of, oh, we got to get the cure for this virus. We got to contain it. We got to do all this stuff. So all three movies are pretty different in feel. Though I must say this is the worst in the trilogy. Now, every plot beat in this has been done many times over and is very, very predictable. There is still some fun to be had, most notably if you try to track Aidan Gillen's accent. It's pretty fun to try and hear him not do a weird British accent like he does on Game of Thrones. But his accent's fun, but nothing that'll leave you impressed or particularly stunned after you walk out of the theater. Number 39, Solo, a Star Wars story. A very dull and largely boring affair. None of the story beats are remotely entertaining or new, because basically everything that happens here we already knew, or we're told we've never heard of this before, so it doesn't matter. Much, like Daenerys Targaryen, her whatever character she is in this movie. Like, why do we care about her? We've never heard of her before. She's not remotely important here, right? Right, but we're going to make her pretend to be important. Now, the one thing that I walked out of this movie thinking almost immediately was, I really wish I could see the Lord and Miller cut of this movie. Because, you know, they hired Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who did the Lego Movie, the 21 Jump Street movies, to make this movie. And then Kathleen Kennedy fired them, like, when they finished the movie. Like, no, this is too, like, comedy. So you're out of here, and they remade the whole movie to this. I would love to see their version. I know we never will, but I would love to see that version of this movie. Now, theoretically, this is supposed to be a very fun adventure movie, right? But it's not really even fun. There's some entirely stupid sequel baiting at the end when, spoilers, Darth Maul is alive, which I think I can't remember if I started laughing or going, what in the world is this? Because it threw me for a complete loop, because like I don't pay attention to the TV shows in the Star Wars universe. So I figured, well, he got cut in half. He's dead, right? No, he's not. He's alive. What? Yeah, but don't bother. 38 overall. You Were Never Really Here. Lynn Ramsey has a very interesting directorial style, which is on full display in this movie. It looks beautiful. The premise of this, I really don't know what it is, but it's like this dude is like a hostage rescuer for hire or something. I don't really know. Joaquin Phoenix is great here in his lead role in this film. Though the plot's very lackluster, I'm not even really sure what happened, but it looks great. Joaquin Phoenix is great, so I do recommend the movie, but I really don't know what happened in it. Number 37 overall, Upgrade. Has some fun action sequences and very terrific camera work I loved, but I can't recommend it on a plot level for sure. Number 36 overall, Tomb Raider. There are some very great action set pieces and some good performances from the cast. Mostly Alicia Vikander's great here as Lara Croft. But the movie gets absolutely derailed by a very tedious and bland story you've seen done before and done better. This is mostly like Indiana Jones 3, The Last Crusade, but infinitely worse with all of the father stuff and going through a tomb type stuff. And to me, this movie at least proved that I don't really think Lara Croft can be a compelling character for a film. I don't think so. Number 35 overall, Saturday Church. A very unique tale about a black trans male to female teenager. The song numbers, as this is a musical, are pretty good. Most notably, Conditions of Love is a great musical number in this film. The story is emotionally moving. Unfortunately, not enough to make you truly care about these characters as much as you really should. But I enjoyed it quite a bit. I do recommend it. Number 34 overall, The Hurricane Heist, a ridiculously stupid movie that has some absolutely hilarious moments. You will laugh endlessly at the pure stupidity being displayed on screen. This is not a good movie by any stretch of the word, but it is a lot of fun, and it is just so entertaining, even though it's absolutely awful. And there is, if you're interested, there's a great How Did This Get Made episode on the Hurricane Heist that I highly recommend. It's a great episode, hilarious movie, although that wasn't probably the intention, but it is absolutely hilarious. Oh, no. Number 33 overall, The Party. This is an interesting exploration of dynamics between both friends and romantic partners. Unfortunately, you've seen the same story many times, as it's, husband leaving his wife for another woman after a long marriage. It's that story, but he's also terminally ill at the same time. So you've seen the story before, but it is moderately interesting. Number 32, Winchester, a pretty standard jump scare reliant haunted house story, but there's some interesting set pieces near the end. 31, Lean on Pete. an overlong and seemingly pointless look at one boy's journey to find a home and a purpose in his life following his father's death. This I expected to be a very emotionally moving film. It really wasn't. You know, it's about this young boy who befriends a horse, and the horse is aging and, you know, spoilers, dies. It's not as emotionally moving as I thought it was going to be, at least for me. And the one thing that I kept coming back to when the movie ended was this did not feel right. Now, I know this is adapted from a book, so I may have to look into when the book was published to see if my theory is right. But to me, it seemed to be the horse thing seems very secondary. I almost thought that we're supposed to read this as this young teen guy's lover that has died, of some indeterminate lover of some kind. But maybe I'm right, and it's just the book was published before you could write that story. I don't know. I could be wrong on that. I might be. I don't know. It felt really weird. The horse thing seemed very, very secondary to me. Number 30 overall, Batman, Gotham by Gaslight. A Elseworlds tale from the DC universe where Batman is transported back to Victorian England and must solve the case of Jack the Ripper. This is a pretty standard Batman animated flick for the DC animated universe. The animation is nothing really special, like from a visual standpoint, but it's fine. And the reveal of who Jack the Ripper is in the Batman universe is quite interesting and paints that character in a very interesting and new light, as it's Commissioner Jim Gordon is Jack the Ripper in this film. It paints Jim Gordon in a very interesting light. But nothing else about it is particularly fun or interesting to me. Stupid. It's a fascinating tale.
Okay.
The way Gordon and his wife are portrayed in the film and in the comic version of this, it's wholly believable in the context of this story.
Okay.
It is. Number 29 overall, Insidious, The Last Key, the fourth in the franchise. A very emotionally engaging story combined with some interesting lore concepts. Make for a very solid, if unspectacular, horror film. The acting is pretty suspect, as is typical for these kinds of films. And a knowledge of the previous three films will help you, but it's not fully necessary. Unfortunately, all of the scares are purely jump scares, nothing really built atmospherically, but it's still an interesting film. Number 28 overall, Early Man. Terrific animation, surprisingly funny comedy combined for a great film. Unfortunately, is a very standard sports movie. The underdog beats the unbeatable champions story that you've seen 8,000 times. This is probably one of the better versions of that story, but it's such an uninteresting story that I can't really recommend. And this is another Netflix movie, but a good one, Mute. It borrows some basic ideas from Blade Runner, mostly the setting and general framing device of film noir set in a future world, but differentiates itself enough to create a fully unique and wonderful film. The plot starts off simple enough. This man's girlfriend vanishes and he has to track her down. Turns into something much more complex than that as the story progresses. The film is a truly stunning, emotional, and visual spectacle with terrific performances and a thoughtful, intelligent story. Number 26 overall, Mom and Dad. An enjoyable romp through a completely insane premise. Parents wanting to murder their own children. The motivation for that? Static signal on the television has motivated them to kill their children. Cage is otherworldly levels of hammy in this movie. Yeah, Nick Cage is in this. He's otherworldly levels of hammy. At times, unfortunately, not enough for the kind of movie this is. The movie doesn't hold back on the gore or violence. At times, it does go for pure shock factor, like most notably the scene where we watch a woman strangle her baby that she just gave birth to with the umbilical cord. This is not a film to watch for a thoughtful message or intellectual examination of characters or anything. But if you enjoy either absurdity, Nick Cage, or children being murdered, I can highly recommend this film. Number 25 overall, Benji, a quality family dog picture. Number 24, The Commuter. The first hour of this movie is absolutely incredible. Unfortunately, the last 30 minutes is an overblown mess of a action conspiracy theory thriller. Number 23 overall, Den of Thieves. A vastly less interesting version of Heat, but still quality. Number 22 overall, Suicide Squad, Hell to Pay. Another animated DC film. A quality film that digs deep into DC comic lore while telling an admittedly interesting story about spirituality. Number 21 overall, I Can Only Imagine, from the Erwin brothers. This is surprisingly a very good story, supposedly about the biggest Christian song in music history. I've never heard of the song. Granted, I don't really follow Christian music very closely. Now, the thing I did enjoy the most about this is that it's really about the healing and transformative nature of music, and really has very little to do with Christianity. So I did enjoy this one quite a lot. Now, we're into my honorable mentions. Number 20 overall, Thoroughbreds. This is a very entertaining dark comedy about two girls' attempts to plan the perfect murder. It contains one of my favorite shots of the year, as we use one of my favorite techniques when executed well, the long take. Now, in this scenario, in this scene, there's two girls, Anya Taylor-Joy, the girl who's kidnapped and Split, if you're familiar with that one, her, and this other girl whose name I don't remember. So the other girl is drugged and is unconscious. Now, Anya Taylor-Joy is going to go kill her stepfather while this other girl's unconscious and then pin the murder on her. And the long take is we watch the passed out girl sit on the couch for like 3 minutes while in the background we hear Anya Taylor-Joy murdering her stepfather. And then she comes back down, covered in blood, holding the giant bloody knife, puts the knife in the other girl's hand, and then lays down in her lap and just starts bawling uncontrollably. And one of my favorite shots of the year, that sequence. Absolutely incredible. Absolutely great shot. Very wonderful, tension-filled 2.5 minutes there. And the rest of the movie's pretty entertaining, too. Oh, you only have, what, like 4 honorable mentions?
No, actually, I got 10.
Oh.
Number 20 for me, the Hurricane Heist. I won't go into detail. It's an unbelievable heist story of stealing lots of money during a hurricane, which is too funny to not like.
Hold on, my question. So you watched 25 movies, but you did 10 worst, you're going to have 10 honorable mentions and your 10 best?
Well, did I say 25?
Yeah.
Well, oh, sorry, I only got one. I skipped 11 through 14. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got 6 honorable mentions. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I got some numbers I skipped.
Okay, so I'll get back to you when I get up to
Yes.
16.
Yes.
All right, so number 19 is Game Night. Yes, Game Night. A movie I didn't care much for the first time, but I watched it again, and it is pretty good, actually. I love the scene introductions, the way they're framed. It looks very much like you're zooming in on a game board of some sort. The movie is, actually pretty funny without devolving into stupid sex comedy for the whole film. There are some genuinely funny moments. Now, I will still admit the plot is way too convoluted. Mm-hmm. But I did like this a lot more than I did initially. Number 18 overall is Alex Strangelove. This is another Netflix film. The short version of this is basically the teen sex comedy version of Love, Simon is this movie. Now, it does rely a bit too much on crude humor, but is still a wonderful, if a bit cheesy rom-com for gay teens. It works very well. There is a very interesting bisexual storyline that's tossed aside rather quickly for kind of the more standard closeted gay guy story. That being said, this film does explore the universality of the queer experience for the last 15 minutes or so, and is a very delightful, heartfelt journey. Number 17 overall, I apologize in advance for my French. Je ne suis pas un homme facile, or I am not an easy man. This is another Netflix film. This is a French rom-com with a very unique satirical premise that almost feels like a long South Park episode. That premise being that a particularly chauvinistic man is transported into a matriarchal society that mirrors our own in every conceivable way, but with men being treated the way women are. So women occupy every position of power, freely make comments about random men's appearances, and casually attempt to rape men whenever they want. The satire is very strong and motivates all viewers to strive for a better society for women and people of all genders and sexualities. Some points are lost for me because this entire film did feel like a very extended and insanely less profane episode of South Park, but it is still very good nonetheless. Number 16 overall, Every Day. This has a very intriguing premise. It is adapted from a book, which I did read the book back when it first came out. I don't remember much about it now. But the premise is that this spirit wakes up in a different body every day, and one day it falls in love with a girl that it meets and attempts to stay near her. It's adapted from the book, and some of the nuance of the book, I feel, is lost in the film version. There is this whole subplot in the book about whether or not people are attracted to each other purely based on the personality and the person they are, or if they're simply attracted to the physical exterior. This is dealt with in the book as the spirit primarily inhabits female bodies, and the girl that they fall in love with identifies as straight, and she has to decide if she's still attracted to the spirit even though she's presumably straight. Now, they do get rid of this in the movie because the spirit figures out how they can stay in the same body for more time. So, what body do they stay in? If you're guessing, you're right. The super hot straight white dude, that's the body they stick in. So there's no real possible queer conflict that can arise. For at least the book is a relatively interesting queer story, but also an interesting story in general. And that kind of level of nuance is mostly lost in the movie. There's still a bit of it here that's intriguing, but I did still enjoy this quite a lot. So, and then you already did one honorable mention.
Yes, you can do 15.
All right. Number 15 overall, American Animals. Barry Keoghan is on a roll, folks. Dunkirk, Killing of a Sacred Deer, like he's just on a roll here. Now, this is a semi-documentary and dramatization of events at the same time, because it goes for, we cut away to like interviews with the people that really partook in this event, this art heist where they attempted to rob the art books from their school library that are very valuable. And it does attempt, and I think pretty accurately, probably, I have no experience to verify that one way or the other, to portray how a robbery planned by normal everyday people would likely go, as they're absolutely awful at their attempted heist. I particularly love the way this film attempts to philosophize on excitement and striving for new experiences. I found to be very interesting. And yeah, the cast is really great. Obviously, Barry Keoghan's great. The other main dude, I don't know his name, but if you watch American Horror Story, he's the one who leads the violent murder cult in season 7. It's that guy. He's the other main lead guy in this movie. A very different role. He's not leading a murder cult in this one. But
you got a choice between Evan Peters, Blake Jenner, or Jared Abrahamson.
I don't think it's the Jenner. It's one of the other two. I don't know which, but
okay.
Yeah, he led the murder cult in season 7 of American Horror Story. But I don't know. He's in this. He's really good in a very different role. But all around, I particularly enjoyed American Animals quite a lot.
Okay, number 15 for me, Unsane, from Steven Soderbergh. It's a stalker movie that is pretty good. You'll probably talk about it more.
I will.
In
the top 10.
A short time from now. So I'll let you discuss it more.
All right, number 14 overall for me, A Kid Like Jake from Silas Howard, starring one of your favorites, Jim Parsons, in this film. And, you know, this is a film that makes me go, what does Jim Parsons do? Because he's always great in these movies that are like very small, mostly queer-themed films. And then he's in Big Bang, where he's like half trying most of the time. Anyway, this is a very heartwarming, delightful, and honest slice of life drama that deals with the potential challenges of parenting a queer child. In this one, it's not explicitly stated in any way, but Jim Parsons and Claire Danes, their young son likes to dress up in dresses and act out Disney princess movies and stuff. And then the conflicts that arise when he goes to preschool, where the other kids aren't as receptive to those practices that the young son likes to make. And I was particularly engaged. I quite enjoyed this film a lot, obviously. That's why it's up here. And I loved it. And Jim Parsons gives one of his best performances in a long while, really since The Normal Heart, the AIDS drama that he was in. He's great here. Claire Danes is great. The kid doesn't do a lot, but they're very good for the 10 minutes they do things. So all in all, Octavia Spencer is in this too. And she is really, really great as well.
Okay, number 14 for me, Benji. You just discussed that, but this is a decent movie. Honestly, it's pretty much like the old Benji.
Oh, I loved the dog in this one. It was so adorable.
Yeah,
he pushed the dumpster and unlocked the door. Oh, it was adorable.
So did the original Benji. This is it's a take on that first Benji, and it's pretty much the same. So it comes in at number 14.
All right. Number 13 for me. I'm ready to ruffle some feathers. Number 13 overall, Black Panther. Falls outside the top 10 for me. Now, it does one of the things I love, firmly establishes itself in a genre and then plays with the conventions of that genre. It plays a lot with superhero conventions. And I love the first, I'd say, hour and a half of this movie, which is basically a treatise on the bad ideas of modern conservative politics and how they're awful, stupid ideas, is basically the first hour and a half of this movie. Then the last half hour devolves into giant rhino fight. So I loved that first hour and a half, which I found to be a very interesting, very thoughtful exploration of the politics of Wakanda and the nature of leadership and what kind of policies are most conducive to quality governance, isolationist or more expansive free trading of knowledge and goods and whatnot. And that stuff I liked. I did not care for when it devolved the last 20, 30 minutes into pretty standard, okay, these two people had to punch each other for 20 minutes now. That
Star.
Hmm.
I think this is either Amazon Prime or Netflix. I think Amazon Prime probably. Andy Rifkin was the director. It starred Burt Reynolds in probably, at least it should be his last role. Burt Reynolds.
Oh.
No.
Okay. Sorry.
Burt Reynolds plays.
I heard you say Andy Richter. I was like,
yeah, he plays.
Okay, Andy Richter's in this. Okay.
He plays some movie star, which honestly, this would have worked, I think, a lot better had Burt Reynolds just play Burt Reynolds in this, because these guys, they make up their own film festival in Nashville, Tennessee, and they invite the superstar actors. This is the 4th year they've done it. They invited whoever Burt Reynolds plays, and it's got some neat editing parts where Burt Reynolds goes, and he's actually in the movie Smokey and the Bandit with Burt Reynolds. And Burt Reynolds, again, his character's in the movie in Deliverance with Burt Reynolds. It would have worked a lot better, I think, if Burt had played Burt. But at 82 or 83 years old, it was a pretty good movie. The Last Movie Star.
Number 12 overall, A Quiet Place. For me, a very interesting premise and unique film. You know, the whole sound bit. It does suffer from a few logic problems. You know, like when they're walking and the sound there is made, is that too little noise or what? You know, the acting is tremendous, although I must say Emily Blunt suffers from the most ill-timed pregnancy maybe in all of film history in this film. Although it works out in the end for her, mostly. Most of this premise in film does seem mostly believable and well thought out. It offers a refreshing approach to horror filmmaking. Creature design is also monstrously great here.
Okay, number 12 for me is Tully. Stars Charlize Theron, one of my favorites.
A bit different role than the one I talked about earlier, huh?
A bit different. Honestly, this one, I honestly need to watch this a second time just to see if the premise at the end of the movie, the super duper surprise, can actually, is it really pulled off throughout the movie, or as I'm thinking off the top of my head, that there's just points in the movie it doesn't make sense. So Tully comes in at number 12 right now.
Number 11 overall for me. Speaking of great children's films, from Hiromasu Yonebayashi, from Studio Ponic, their debut feature, after splitting off from Studio Ghibli, Mary and the Witch's Flower. This is an absolutely beautiful animation with a minorly standard anime tale about this young girl who discovers a magical flower that grants her the abilities of a witch for a day. The visuals are very stunning. The story is remarkably interesting for this kind of premise, as there are moments where we explore the potentially devastating effects of magic on people, such as being subjected to human experimentation, as well as the predatory nature of some school systems. Loved Mary and the Witch's Flower.
Number 11 for me, Upgrade. Originally it was going to be titled STEM, but they had to change it for some reason to Upgrade. It's a good movie. It's not great. There are some things that happen in this movie that I had to question. I can't remember what they are right off the top of my head now, but
the computer thing gaining sentience bit.
Yes, that with yeah, just that it's pretty good, and it's short, which helps. So Upgrade at number 11.
Number 10 overall. We're into my top 10. Number 10 overall, Tully, from Jason Reitman and Diablo Cody, with Charlize Theron. I guess the unofficial end to the Reitman and Cody aging trilogy, I guess is what we're going to call. call it, you know, with Juno and Young Adult, and now this one. This is a very funny and brutally honest film about the struggles of modern motherhood. Deals very heavily with mental health and postpartum depression after an unexpected twist in that third act. Charlize is funny, plays her part perfectly, as is most of the rest of the cast. Some of the dream sequences did catch me off guard, especially the very first time it happened. I was sitting in the theater, and the first dream sequence happened, and I'm like, oh no. Uh-oh, is Jason Reitman going artsy symbolism on us now? Oh boy, we're in for a trip. And then it's, oh no, this is all foreshadowing. Okay, gotcha. And that was rather clever foreshadowing for that twist at the end. I loved it. I thought the twist made the film even better. Like, I was kind of iffy on it. And then the twist happened. I'm like, oh, you're incredible, guys. Gotcha. So I loved it quite a lot.
All right. Number 10 for me, totally opposite than you, is The Polka King.
Oh, I was going to say, which one? Rampage? Ready Player One?
Yeah, there's a few, but The Polka King starts us off with Jack Black. I thought he did a great job. This was a surprisingly good movie for me. I was entertained and thought it was just great. So Polka King at number 10.
Number 9 overall, Wes Anderson's latest, Isle of Dogs. This is a very loving and heartwarming tale about one boy's journey to find his lost dog. The messages of this film are very clear. Propaganda and state-sourced media or endorsed by the government media is bad. And immigration issues, people different from us should not be excluded for fear of what they might bring, but should be loved and accepted for the commonalities we all share, are very clear and very important in this modern age. A truly riveting adventure film as well, very funny, very charming, as all Wes Anderson movies tend to be. Beautiful to look at, too, as you would expect. Truly terrific addition to the Wes Anderson filmography here.
Number 9 for me is Love, Simon. This is a powerful story, and I'm sure you will go into more details here shortly.
I will.
It's a great story, good movie. Number 9, Love, Simon.
Number 8 overall, DC Animated is on a roll, people. Batman Ninja from Junpei Mizusaki, with Tony Hale voicing the Joker in this film. A truly unique and refreshing entry into the DC Animated library. Batman and company are sent back in time to feudal Japan due to a malfunction with Gorilla Grodd's Quake engine, which is a time machine, of course. The story, when it bothers to tell one, this is one of the few times where I love these kind of movies that don't really have much of a plot or just a bunch of action sequences thrown together. This is the rare instance where it worked for me. The movie's mostly concerned with getting you from awesome action set piece to another one. Now, when the story is told, it does attempt and at least partially succeed at reaching a deconstruction of the Batman character, very Dark Knight-esque here, and what it truly means to be a human, or a hero, sorry. As a final selling point, let me tell you one of the action sequences. Now, a very Voltron-esque robot made up out of 5 castles fight a giant version of Batman made entirely out of monkeys and bats that Batman is controlling.
Okay.
Also, Batman and Joker have a samurai sword fight in this film as well. So, some great action pieces. And when it bothers, a very interesting story, beautiful animation style in this thing. They do a lot of different things. There's some like watercolor animation that's beautiful. Most of it has a very anime feel. It looks really nice, very Attack on Titan style animation for most of it. Some beautiful watercolor work. All around, great animation and a lot of fun here.
Number 8 for me, you've discussed already, Game Night. I thought this was done very well. Sometimes it's a little bit over the top. Jesse Plemons, I thought he was great in this movie. And Jason Bateman, of course, was good as always. So game night, number 8.
Number 7 overall, Avengers Infinity War. Now, I must admit that if I am evaluating this as a standalone film, it is really bad. Because it relies on the audience having at best cursory knowledge of at least 17 other movies. You don't need to know anything about Ant-Man. He's not important here. Worth of plot points and character development. The only real character in this movie is really Thanos. Maybe you can make the case Iron Man has a little bit of an arc in this, but that's really about it. No one else's story is really explained at all, as Marvel assumes, probably rightly, that you've seen all their other movies and they don't bother setting up anything for a sequel either, obviously, with the ending. Now, the ending does leave the future of Marvel, of the MCU, in doubt somewhat. There are a lot of deaths I can't really see remaining canon, at least not for very long. But as a culmination of 18 other films, this goes about how you would expect. Characters make their triumphant return to the screen, and some characters possibly meet their ends, and events that unfold present giant and legitimate consequences that should, and probably will, since this is Marvel, not DC, shape and cast a giant shadow over all future events in the MCU. The action sequences are plentiful and breathtaking to behold. Doctor Strange gets to do a lot of stuff in here, a lot of cool stuff that I thought was sadly missing from his solo outing. The final battle sequence in Wakanda is lengthy and glorious. Now, you could keep this entire ending canon because there's still a lot of interesting characters Marvel hasn't put in the movies at all. And with Disney buying Fox, they now have all the X-Men they can do. They have all the Fantastic Four they can do. So I don't know. We'll see when Avengers 4 comes out next year what they're going to do. But right now, I love this one.
Number 7 for me is American Animals. Your documentary on a heist of rare books. When I went into the theater, I was not expecting very much from this movie. But it's actually a pretty good movie. Lots of humor, plenty of humor, and very well told story. American Animals at number 7.
Number 6 overall, Unsane. Steven Soderbergh is usually at his best when he's experimental or working with male strippers, one or the other. And he's great here. Now, this is a very intense and harrowing experience, really unlike any other I've had at a horror movie in the theater until one later in the year that I'll talk about in a bit. And now this film is shot entirely on iPhone, and you can kind of tell at some points, especially if you saw it in the theater, you can kind of tell. But that adds to this film a great deal, I felt. Every shot, every scene feels very up close, very personal, like you're on the other end of a video call with the protagonist here. There's one particular scene, the first confrontation in solitary confinement, that is mostly a static long shot for 2 to 3-ish minutes. It is one of the most intense scenes I've seen in a long time at the time I wrote this review. There was some other stuff we'll talk about in a bit. Now, this film does the way like a James Wan movie would be shot and edited. Because everything here is very slow, very long shots that really let you get into the feeling and the intensity of what is occurring on screen here. Most notably, to me at least, like when Toni Collette is trying to convince her husband to throw the book into the fireplace. Like if this was a James Wan movie, it'd be all close-ups, quick cuts between the two. How does Ari Aster have this shot? It's it's a medium hold, and you come slowly back and forth between them as she's going crazy, as Toni Collette's just going nuts here. I loved how that was shot. I love the dollhouse framing device, this whole thing. Now, sadly, it does kind of devolve into a somewhat simple satanic cult finale, but that is still very utterly terrifying when it's built into the rest of the story. Toni Collette puts on an absolute masterclass in this film that should but won't, since this is a horror film, net her at worst a Best Actress nom this year at the Oscars. The title of this movie, Hereditary, fits so perfectly with this movie as it does explore the familial inheritance of mental illness. And there is, for a very long portion of the movie's runtime, this underlying possibility, much like in The Babadook, that this is almost entirely, or at least mostly, in our main female protagonist's head. Now, at the end, it turns out, no. But for at least, I'd say, a good hour and a half, that was in my head of, is Toni Collette just going insane with grief here over her mother and then her daughter? Is she just going insane? And then it's, oh no, there's actually a cult that's killing people and stuff. Okay. And I'm not really sure if that would have been more or less terrifying. But this is really a cinematic experience that really, at least so far this year, has little to no rival as far as unnerving, horrific filmmaking.
Okay, number 4 for me, Black Panther. You discussed this at length.
Mm-hmm.
Not much for me to add. It's a bit of a long movie, though, for me to sit through. A bit long, but it's a really good movie. Black Panther, number 4.
Number 3 overall, Paddington 2. The first one I adored. This one I think is even better. This is just an adorably animated film. Paddington Bear is so cute, and it has a very heartfelt, touching story about love, family, and adoption. It combines for an absolutely delightful, if very tear-inducing film, especially that finale. But this is just great stuff here. Loved it dearly.
Oh, another one you just discussed recently, number 3 for me, Avengers Infinity War. Very good movie. It's an epic movie with a cast of thousands, so it seems. You get to see all the MCU characters. Number 3, Avengers Infinity War.
Not all. Ant-Man is not in the movie.
Yeah, okay.
Everyone else is. Ant-Man is not. Number 2 overall for me, Deadpool 2. This was great. An absolutely hilarious romp through superhero tropes. It is a somewhat standard X-Men story, though that is part of the point. Much like the first one, it's a very standard origin story. That's kind of part of the point of Deadpool, is that it's very generic stories that he just makes fun of the whole time that they're going on, basically. The jokes are higher volume, higher quality than in the first movie by and large. There's so many packed in that it'll probably take you multiple viewings to catch all of them. The action sequences are terrific. And one thing I don't commonly talk about, the opening credit sequence in this film is as you would expect coming from David Leitch, or David Leitch, maybe. Atomic Blonde last year and worked on John Wick 1, I think was stunt coordinator or something on John Wick. Great action sequences, as you'd expect coming from that kind of a pedigree. The story does actually manage to cram in some surprisingly poignant emotional moments in between all of its jokes. And I loved it quite a lot, honestly. That's why it's number 2 overall for me so far.
Yes, number 2 for me, Rampage. Yes, this has good action. It has plenty of good storyline. Unfortunately, there are some unrealistic moments in the movie, but a lot of movies have unrealistic moments. But Rampage, I thought, was fantastic with lots of good action. So, number 2, Rampage.
My number 1 overall, the best movie of the year so far to me, Annihilation. Alex Garland continues to be incredible. Ex Machina was incredible. Honestly, I think Ex Machina was better than this one. I think I like Ex Machina more than I do Annihilation, but Annihilation is still absolutely incredible. Now, the film does, I think, work best when you take its narrative literally, though you can take it in a symbolic route, kind of as a giant cancer allegory, is mostly what it works as on a symbolic level. But I just loved everything about this movie. The pacing is great. The tone is perfect. The visuals are so, so gorgeous. I don't think there's been a movie yet other than this one. Maybe Blade Runner last year. Blade Runner 2049, I think, is maybe part of this, where I'm like, I actually think I may want to get a 4K thing at some point and actually see what these look like at home on 4K. But this is just a beautiful film and so, so incredible. Still, Ex Machina is better, but this was just incredible from start to finish.
Okay, last but not least, of course, for me, number one, Deadpool 2. This one it's just a great movie. It's plenty of fun, lots of laughter. It's fun when a movie, it just doesn't take itself seriously, and it
ruins the whole movie plot-wise. I mean, sure it does, but I don't care.
I mean, Deadpool is good from start to finish, so that ends up at number one right now for me.
Follow us on Twitter at Unspooled Isaac for all of my shortened reviews. And you can email the show at unspooledpodcast@gmail.com for all your movie-related questions and other queries. If you have any you'd like to be answered on the show at some point. And until that next episode, goodbye.
It's a good thing I came down early.
Yeah, an hour 56 and a half.